Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
I'm Scott Warr, and today we're going to jump into an exciting topic that, many of us, well, at least Don and I, don't really know a whole lot about, and that's ketones. We've had guests on the podcast before that have talked about ketosis and getting into ketosis and having those ketones, which is a type of fuel. And we decided we wanted to get an expert to help us understand a little bit more about ketones. So we've invited Michael Brandt. He's a co-founder and CEO of HVMN, which is Health Via Modern Nutrition. He's also an avid athlete, triathlete, marathoner, has a super fast triathlon time. We're not going to tell you because trail runners, we don't care about time. But prior to starting HVMN, he received his BS in computer science and design at Stanford, was a product manager at Google and an adjunct professor at the Academy of Art in San Francisco. He's always been a leader, a lifelong student, and designing products around new technologies and emerging needs. So, Michael, thanks for coming on and helping us understand about ketones.
Hey, Scott, I've got to interrupt before he officially comes on. And he has a super fast personal marathon at 2:42, which is screaming fast. And I know we don't really talk about times, but that's fast. Welcome to the podcast.
Scott, Don, great to be here. I can already tell it's going to be a fun conversation today. Thanks for the introduction.
So first of all, for people that never even heard the word ketone, what is a ketone? Where does it come from?
Ketone is one of the oldest forms of fuel that has existed for humans, period. For 300,000 years, we've made ketones. We make ketones whenever our blood sugar is low, which is this totally natural thing. It's actually supposed to happen. On the savannah, there's no Reese's Puffs, there's no Sour Patch Kids, sour straws, there's no processed carbohydrates 24/7 on the savannah. There's occasional access to grains and berries, but you're often endurance hunting. You don't have access to high concentration of processed carbohydrate, and you are often low blood glucose. And your brain needs a form of fuel to function in a low glucose state, which again is common. It's meant to happen. Your body is not supposed to have elevated blood sugar, blood glucose all the time. That's actually bad for you. So in this state of low blood glucose, your body makes what's called ketones, always has, and that fuels your brain especially. Ketones can fuel all the muscles in your body, your skeletal muscles, your cardiovascular muscles, and your neurons in particular are especially receptive when there are ketones present. So it's this age-old fuel. What we figured out is a way to make a pure ketone in a bottle. So in 2019, we got a multi-million-dollar contract with the Department of Defense Special Operations Command and have been doing 7 different subtasks with special operators at altitude, high stress, high strain environments, working and studying ketones for endurance applications and mental cognitive efficiency tasks, and seeing a lot of interesting results. Did a lot of iteration on our supply chain and formulation, and then took this Navy SEAL juice and launched it to the consumer world in January of last year. So it's June 2023. We launched it in January of 2022, so a little over a year and a half ago, and it's really taken over. We had 34,000 people on our wait list when we launched. A lot of people knew that we had been up to something with special operators, and it's only taken off since then. So happy to be here, happy to answer all the questions. There's no dumb questions whatsoever. Like, this was all new to me at one point, and happy to dive into it.
Oh, we're gonna challenge that statement that there are no dumb questions, Michael. So we don't live on the savannah, and I do have a small convenience store down the road where I can get cheese puffs and M&Ms and pretzels. So how do I make ketones? Does a normal everyday person manufacture ketones in their biology?
You do whenever you are low blood glucose. So that happens typically when you're fasting. It happens when you're doing endurance exercise. It happens if you're eating low carbohydrate to begin with, or any combination thereof, right? So if you fast overnight, which most people do because you're asleep, it's not a long fast, but you fast for 8 hours, 10 hours when you sleep. If you wake up and you go for a jog in a fasted state, okay, you're checking kind of 2 of the 3 boxes, and you are likely clearing out the latent blood glucose that you have from whatever you ate yesterday, and you're likely starting to ramp up your own endogenous ketone production. So everyone's making it. This is not like a black or white thing where either you're making ketones or you're not. It's a metabolic substrate. We all have some ketones present. It's more of a spectrum of like how much are you making based on your body's energy demand and how much carbohydrate you have to fuel that energy demand or not.
So I'm just picturing you're running your fast PR record in your marathon. At mile 20, your carbs are depleted unless you've been taking some kind of gel or some kind of simple carbohydrate along the way. Is your body at mile 20, is that spectrum of ketone pretty high at mile 20? And you're fueling your brain and your muscles?
That's right. A lot of what you're doing as an endurance athlete, so I'm a marathoner, I've dabbled in some ultras, anything that's really half marathon, certainly anything longer than that. What you're doing in your training is you're developing metabolic flexibility to make your body better at making and using ketones. Being glycolytic, meaning being really dominant on carbohydrates as an energy input, that makes a lot of sense if you're doing an 800 or a 5K, even up 10K, where it's very poppy, it's very power driven. Once you go into longer efforts, it's less about that max power output and more about how do you stay at this level of efficiency and hold on to it for as long as possible, right? Like we all know as runners, like you have this kind of red line and you want to be like right underneath it. There's something that happens when you go over that red line where you just blow up way quicker versus if you take your mile pace down, not drastically, but slightly to where you're below that red line, all of a sudden you're able to maintain that for a lot longer. And one of the things that's happening at that red line is that you are going in above the red line, you're using a lot of carbohydrate, you're using glucose and blood sugar, and that's a very limited battery. You just don't have that much of that on deck to supply you for a whole ultra or even a whole marathon. And underneath that red line, you are using a more dominantly ketones and fat, which is its own separate energy source, and you just have 100 times more of that. Even on a lean individual, you have way more fat and ketones. And so you can think of it as this like efficient backup energy source. If your body's like a Prius, then glucose is your gas and ketones are your electricity. Like you have 2 different energy sources, 2 different batteries with 2 different capacities and different characteristics. So again, like if you're going to sprint, if it's time to do 400s at the track, you should carb load. If it's time to do a longer run, it makes a lot of sense to do like zone 2 training. One of the benefits that you get from zone 2 training, which I think a lot of people are familiar with in the endurance world, is you're mainly at a lower intensity. And among other benefits, you're dominantly using fat and ketones and not carbohydrates, and you're getting really good at that energy system, like that battery within the Prius model.
Boy, I love that example of the Prius because we kind of get there's 2 different systems, and that really cleared it up, and I appreciate that. Before we get into some of the what's and how's this works, because it's great to understand what we're doing and the benefit to make people say, I get it. I think I should go that direction. I'd like to know from you what you did. What did you notice as an accomplished triathlete, a marathoner, long distance person? What did you notice as the problem before you came across what you've created and after? Tell us some personal experience of when you found it, you said, oh, here's what I noticed. I can't wait to share it. What was that?
Yeah, well, I got started in this whole space. I was a computer science undergrad at Stanford, pretty big nerd, and I got into athletics by way of biohacking. I started measuring everything. I put on a continuous glucose monitor back before it was cool. I actually had to like order it off the gray market, off of like European eBay. Like someone was reselling a bunch. So it was not like cool the way that you see Levels and NutriSense and Sapiens out there right now. It is back in like 2015, very gray market. And I started measuring everything from my calories to my footsteps, to my cadence, to my blood glucose. I started measuring all these inputs, and I was doing extended fasts. I did a 7-day long fast to see what would happen. Saw my, just like we were talking about, like your blood glucose goes down, it depresses, and then it stabilizes, and your body ramps up its endogenous ketone production. So have done a lot of biohacking over the years. And then I got kind of hooked into distance running. And then, I like it. Just the feeling of being out in nature. I like the endorphin rush. I like it's the longest period in the day where I'm reliably not staring at a screen. Like there's many beautiful things about running. And it also melded with that half of my brain that was thinking about it as a engineer, like a systems thinker, as, okay, well, running in the way is like this very simple thing, but when you zoom into it, it is very complex and interesting, from your technique to your foot stride to your nutrition to your how you structure a 16-week block leading into a big race. So I like the intellectual side as well as the athletic side. And what I started seeing as a biohacker, just curious cat in the space, 2015, 16, 17, is that a lot of people were getting into keto diet. A lot of people were getting into bulletproof coffee, which you probably know is, you take coffee, you put fat, you put specifically certain types of fat into your coffee, like MCT. MCT, it's a medium chain triglyceride, which is a simple form of fat that relatively easily turns into ketones. So back in 2015, we had a massive fasting community. We saw people doing keto diet. We saw people doing bulletproof coffee. We saw people jumping through all of these hoops to get their ketones up, and everyone say, hey, I feel really good. I feel really dialed in. I feel really level and focused when I have elevated ketones. And then that led me to ask, okay, well, ketones are clearly the super fuel. So why can't you go to the store and buy a ketone? Why can't you just drink a shot of ketones? And pulling that string ended up being a super interesting question where ketones are really efficient. There's a reason that your body makes them. They're very efficient in terms of oxygen usage in order to generate ATP. Your brain really likes them. They're efficient and effective for a lot of applications, especially in stamina, stressful environments. And when we ponied up, we basically got investor capital together. I pulled together a team. I got the Department of Defense as a customer.
There's a whole podcast right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to it. That basically, like, it was very expensive at the start. Like right now, it's $4.95. It used to be $33 a shot, and so it really made sense for a very fringe, extreme application. And that was cool. I got that, and for several years, worked with elite operators and learned a lot, and got economies of scale. Was able to further capitalize the business, and then invest into a supply chain that was able to support, and a formulation that's able to support making ketones at scale as this nutritional primitive for all. And just to answer your question, like personally, like what it did for me is just like, I feel like it's an unfair advantage where I get to use it a lot. Like I just feel really good when I'm running. I feel really good after I'm running. We were talking a little bit before we recorded. It's not like it's actually not just a sports supplement. It's like after my run, when I want to feel sharp at the office or for a podcast or a board meeting, I actually use Ketone IQ even more then, just to be like as a hybrid athlete. Like I don't get paid to run marathons. I'm not that fast. I'm a serious amateur, but my full-time job is my full-time job. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. That like that mode of switching from athlete training in the morning to, I don't like being sleepy. I can't take a nap in the middle of the day. I don't have that affordance, that luxury. So to be able to snap into it with Ketone IQ to see my professional life through has been a big phase shift for me, to answer your question there.
And it's completely different because I've tried it, the Ketone IQ. In fact, in full disclosure, Scott and I both made sure we had a fresh shot before this podcast.
We did.
And because we knew we had to be at the top of our game. And so that's what we did. There is a distinct difference when using it. It's not like some kind of energy shot with a bunch of caffeine in it and some B12 vitamin. It's not that at all. There's not jittery. It is, you feel just sharper and more creative. Those are my words that I'm coming up with. That's the sense I get when taking this. No jitters. It doesn't keep you up. There isn't a come down. It's just a constant stream of goodness.
Amen. Yeah. What can I say? Like, it's we developed it initially. The Special Operations Command was really interested. They were really interested in hypoxic, so low oxygen altitude applications where there's a decrement of cognitive performance when you're at 20,000 feet, right? You're on the top of Everest. I think we've all seen the videos, or maybe some people listening, I'm sure, have been up there, that you don't have your full cognitive facilities, and it's due to oxygen deprivation. And when you have ketone IQ, you're able to recover a significant amount of cognitive function. It's not an all the way thing. It's just that like anything that can help at that level is interesting. And that's where the Special Operations Command got interested in exogenous ketones. Again, exogenous meaning from outside of your body. Like instead of having to wait for your body to make its own ketones or having to deprive yourself of carbohydrates in order to induce your body to make ketones, the fact that you can have a normal diet, have high energy levels, and then have ketone on top of that was really interesting. And then, yeah, it's cool that it's played out. Like it's as fun as that has been to work with super elite operators and athletes. What I'm here to do is make a dent in metabolic health globally and have it be more than, this special tool for super top 1% of the top 1% performers.
So from the bottle, through the mouth, and into the stomach, how does it pass into your bloodstream, or does it lose anything when it hits the acidic environment of a stomach? What happens? Is it a clean transport of some kind?
Yeah, so what we have in our product, it's called a ketone dial, DIOL, and that fully passes through your GI system. It's very palatable as well, very little stomach upset, like very low instance of people feeling any kind of like nausea, anything like that we saw in some of our earlier iterations on the product. And so very clean to digest. And then ketone dial converts 1-to-1 into BHB, which is beta hydroxybutyrate. That's the scientific name for blood ketones. So there's one step. It's in your liver. It's called first pass metabolism, and you convert that ketone dial into blood BHB, and then you have elevated circulating ketone levels, which you can test. You can do a blood finger prick. So if you drink Ketone IQ and you do a blood finger prick you can buy this on Amazon. It's over the counter, like finger pricks. You can do a blood test, breath test, urine test. The blood is the most accurate. You can see directly, hey, my blood ketones have risen acutely in a matter of minutes, and those ketones are fueling through your body and your brain, and you're doing metabolism all over your body. You're doing metabolism when you're running, you're doing metabolism when you're recovering from your run, you're doing metabolism when you're working, you're doing metabolism when you're sleeping. So ketones are this adaptive fuel that whatever your body is doing, whether it's running or recovering or rebuilding, you're able to use it. Similar to how you could think about like water or protein in terms of like a nutritional primitive that's used kind of dynamically as needed across your entire system.
So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, my body naturally makes ketones, and I can adapt my body to make more of these ketones by maybe doing some intermittent fasting or the diet that I eat, or the way that I exercise in the zone 2. So I can influence the amount of ketones my body makes. Why do I need to take a shot of some synthetic ketone that I'm popping in? Is there a reason why that I would need both?
It's a great question, right? Like you could just do what you're saying. You could just do your second longest run of the week in a fasted state, zone 2, get your body better at making and using its own ketones so that on race day you have that metabolic flexibility. Like you can do all those things without ever drinking any kind of exogenous ketone, for sure. What's interesting about Ketone IQ, exogenous ketones, is that it adds a novel form of fuel. It helps you to perform better, helps you to recover better compared to if you didn't. So like it's maybe a similar analogy as like the cutting edge running shoe or the aero bars on the bike. It's like it's an innovation in the sport that helps, I would say, move the sport forward. Like it's cool that you have better gear shifters on your bike now than you did in the 1970s. It's cool that shoe technology has evolved from where it was 100 years ago or even 20 years ago. So I say along those lines, it's like, no, you like strictly speaking, you don't need it. Like if you're in it just for like the pure love of the game, like you just go run barefoot. Like if you don't care about your PR, like you just run, which I do too. Like go run barefoot. You don't even need a shirt. Probably wear some pants, but you don't need a lot else, right? Like if you really want to like strip it down to fundamentals. But then I would say start laying on there. Hey, if you like this, you know, if it gives you more energy in the day, if you feel zoinked after you run and you don't want to eat a lot of sugar to fuel your runs all the time, then exploring other fuel sources starts being interesting. So it's a tool in the toolkit. It's definitely not something like, oh, you must have the latest. I definitely don't subscribe to that. Like you must have the latest X, Y, or Z in order to be a like real athlete here. Like, you know, I don't think that that's true for anything.
Well, I was leading the witness a little bit because I have a hypothesis, Michael, and I want to see if my hypothesis can be proved out. So, you know, I can make my own ketones, but it seems like that's a long journey. So it's not like I can go out on my long run on Saturday and have ketones at my disposal right away. Having a little shot of ketones in a bottle seems like even if I'm doing the right things to maybe be more fat adapted and manufacture more ketones and have my body use those fuel sources instead of glucose, it seems like this is just it's like taking a goo, right? I mean, it's a quick shot, except it's a different fuel source than a glucose shot.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's easier on your stomach. It's quicker to get into your system. You said in a matter of minutes, your body can start using this ingested ketone IQ and give me the effects that I'm desiring out on a run or after a run.
Yeah, it's really interesting if you compare it with a gel. It's the same concept. The whole way that we recommend using it, the whole way that I use it, the whole way that our elite athlete partners, special operator partners use it is by stacking it. So you actually, what we recommend if you're really trying to crush it, if it's race day, really big effort, is you stack. So you have carbohydrate gels and you have ketone IQ. So this is not meant to like swap that out unless you're like intentionally trying to be a low carb runner, which is its own school of thought. For most people though, like our Ironman champion, our Navy SEALs, Green Berets, like what we do is we stack it. So you have your carbohydrates going through one pathway, and that's mediated by insulin. When you have higher blood sugar, your body releases insulin, and that helps to metabolize the blood sugar and turn that into ATP in your cells. Ketones go through a different pathway. They're not mediated by insulin, and that's going back to the Prius analogy where you're able to have gas and electricity. You're able to have two going at once. So it's not to like replace the other. Like if you're trying to set a PR or just trying to like feel really strong through your run, you're going to want to dual fuel. And then it's a question of like, do you need the latest and the greatest of anything? I think that's kind of a personal question. Like, do you need the Morton or the Alpha Flies or the sweat wicking performance hat? Like what do you need to have a good day out? It's kind of, up to you.
Oh, yeah, you need all of those, by the way, Michael. Yes.
And again, the Prius is a perfect example, of understanding there's two ways to get this Prius down the road. And the best way to do it many times is a little bit of both or stacking, like you said. I'd like to kind of get some insight for you on what the special forces or the special operations folks, how did they use it? What were they solving, and what are they doing now without just disclosing any top secret information? There's plenty of that leaked out already, so let's not make us the source.
Yeah.
No one listens to the podcast that cares about national security, Freeman.
There's some runners out there involved in that.
Yeah, G14 classified info. Yeah, so, dating back to early 2000s, DARPA had a program called Operation Metabolic Dominance, which is pretty badass if you ask me. And the idea there was they created a ketone in isolation, and it was just massively expensive. It cost $20,000, $30,000 a dose. And they proved out this proof of concept that like you could technically do it, and that they did some of the basic science around it to show like ratios of oxygen consumed in ketones versus glucose and other forms of carbohydrate. And the interest was there in the kind of leading edge military communities. DARPA, as many people know, is Defense Advanced Research Projects Association or agency, and they developed, the internet, or it's called ARPANET before it was called the internet. Like, they developed a lot of frontier technologies, some of which we use every single day now. And when they poked around with ketones in the early 2000s in Operation Metabolic Dominance, they saw some really interesting stuff. And then the concept kind of sat on a shelf and gathered dust for many years until my co-founder and I picked it up in the mid 20-teens, 2016, 17, and we said, hey, like, for all the reasons that we were talking about prior, like, this is interesting. People are jumping through all these hoops with the keto diet, with Bulletproof, with intermittent fasting, with endurance training to get their ketones up. And okay, we started looking at the literature, and there's all these benefits, and there seems to be interest from the defense community if we were to do this. So, okay, we potentially have a customer here, and got the ball rolling there. Then in 2019, we got a $6 million contract with Special Operations Command, and they were especially interested. There's 7 different subtasks to that. They were especially interested in altitude training, hypoxia, low oxygen. So that takes place at altitude, also deep sea, also outer space. So mountain training. There's a few different applications of hypoxic. A few different contexts where you could be hypoxic, and that was especially interesting. And then the import value, where if something works in this extreme environment, then you can kind of import that in. Okay, well, at sea level, you have normal oxygen, but if we know something works in this extreme, like if you're sleep deprived and something works, or you're starved and something works, or you're low oxygen and something works, oftentimes you can import that back to like base case and it will still work. But a lot of times when we do testing in physiology, we're looking at these extreme uses because that's where you see the more pronounced effect. And then when you bring it back down to planet Earth, okay, the XYZ still works, but it's importing that understanding from the extreme use case. And in those 7 different subtasks, we ended up doing a lot of work with the 10th Mountain Group in Colorado. They're at altitude. There's a school there for advanced mountaineering where they bring in special operators across all the branches of the armed forces. So the Air Force has their special forces, the Army has Rangers, the Navy has SEALs. Like, each branch of the armed forces has their own special operator component, and those special operators go to, among other places, they go to the 10th Group in Colorado to do their training. And the schoolhouse there was a large participant in our study where we showed some really interesting findings. And then out of that, actually, we ended up hiring someone who ran that schoolhouse. His name is Brian. He was on the participant side for multiple years, and then when he wrapped up his service as a special force, also known as Green Beret, he joined us full time and is now heads up our government efforts in general. So it's nice, like, connectivity there, because we're now continuing into other areas of investigation there where we're looking at traumatic brain injury, concussion. So the mechanism of action of how ketones work is, your brain likes ketones. It helps a lot with cognitive efficiency, helps with the central governor. We can go into all of this stuff more, but
wow,
that basically helps your brain be a better director of motion in the rest of your body. And that same mechanism of action, it seems like that is also helpful if you've experienced brain damage or brain injury or certain types of neurodegenerative disease, where an alternative metabolic substrate, a really efficient metabolic substrate, can in some cases rescue brain metabolism. So it's this very dynamic, adaptive form of fuel that it's not just like caffeine where it's like, hey, it just stims you up and you go. It's like, it's more dynamic than that, and it can help in a few different types of contexts beyond just like pure, hey, I want to set up a marathon PR.
You know, you really have me intrigued with this cognitive comment. You know, if anybody's run more than 50 miles, so you're out on the trail, or out on the road for 8+ hours, your mind starts to go numb, and it's hard for you to do math, easy math.
Scott, from 3 hours, you don't have to be out there 8 hours. I've witnessed you. You start to fall off about 2.5. All right.
Okay, I recognize it after 9. But the point is because your body is using your blood and your oxygen to power the muscles, maybe some of that gets drained away from the brain, and you have a tough time making simple decisions. And you're saying that ketones really target the brain and is energy that the brain can use and helps you in some of the. I mean, I'm intrigued. I need to go out and do a long run and try to do my experiment of one with ketone IQ and see if I'm starting to get a little fuzzy, if I'm starting to get a little, what's 2 + 2, and I can't. It takes me a while to figure that out by taking off my shoes and socks and using my toes. Maybe ketone IQ could be something that could help.
And I'm going to stack on top of that, but before Michael says anything, kind of like the negative chatter that happens in our brain when we start talking to ourselves that this is hard. Oh, I better just stop for a bit. Why am I out here? This is kind of crazy. That's just the body's mechanism to try to protect itself, to shut your performance down so you don't take more demand from the brain. And this ketone IQ could help block some of that negative chatter. That's what I heard you say there as well, Scott. But now we should let the expert tell us.
Well, yeah, it's not just that it's blocking the chatter, it's that it's actually providing substrate to your neurons for energy production. So it's like solving the root problem as well, not just like putting a Band-Aid over the chatter. It's that your brain just has more energy so that it doesn't feel the need to like tell you to slow down. And I was just going to remark that, yeah, like being bad at math, like one of my favorite super low tech.
Hey, Michael, before you go any further, I know you went to Stanford and you're a computer geek, so don't tell me you don't know how to do math.
Well, no. So yeah, look, I got my 800 on my SATs, whatever. But like when I'm on hour 2, maybe I have you guys both be. When I'm on hour 2 of my marathon, I'm already going a little foggy. So my favorite low tech tool as a runner is if people have seen like those rubber bands that you wear on your wrist, they tell you like your time.
Right.
Because literally in my head I can't multiply it by anything. Like I forgot what 10 × 7 is. Like just tell me on mile 10 what time I'm supposed to be at, and it's just like a rubber, because a lot of times the GPS doesn't work perfectly. Like you're if you're running a race, you need to run the course. Like it doesn't matter what your watch says. Like if your watch says 14 and the course says 13, like it's 13. And when you're running in Chicago, there's buildings everywhere. Like GPS doesn't necessarily reliably work. Like so. Anyway, the point being that one of my little hacks or tricks is there's some website that sells these rubber bands that just tell you, okay, if you're trying to run a Boston qualifier pace, then on mile 15 your watch needs to look like this, and then it's a very my mind can kind of grok okay, looking at my watch, is that number bigger or smaller than what it's supposed to be? And just I
didn't know about those. Did you know about those, Don?
Oh,
rubber.
We've never needed it, Scott.
We're never going for we're just trying to get there before they shut off the lights.
Before the sun goes down. And our real measure, did we bring a light on this run or not? That's what our concern is. If we've got a light, we're good.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have a very inclusive attitude towards all of running, because when you watch any kind of race, right, the person in first, absolute dog, obviously. The person in last, if you are around or if you've been that person in last, absolute dog. That person went to hell and back. And then everyone in the middle, also absolute dog. Like everyone is going through their own version of hell to get to where they're at. So like I just very inclusive attitude about it. Like there's people, I'm pretty fast, but there's a lot of people a lot faster than me who are a lot younger, whatever. There's a lot of people that I'm faster than. Like it's all good. Like we're all doing our same thing. And I don't think, unless you're literally the person that is winning the Olympics or winning Boston or winning Western States, like everyone else out there is just like there to have fun. Like you're there to have fun. You're there to become the best possible version of yourself, and it's this analogy that you can carry over into the rest of your life. And it's a great way to stay fit. It's a great way to stay in touch with nature. And I don't have a lot of personal patience or desire to be like any kind of elitist about any of it. Like where everyone's out there working real hard, and everyone's doing a great job.
Michael, I hate to break this to you, but you're a trail runner. See, you came on. We said you're a triathlete and a road runner, but you just spoke to our community. That's exactly how we feel. And one of the things we've said is, if you're in a race, the person in front of you is fast, and the person right behind you is tough, and you're just all doing it together, and everybody is to be respected.
It's one of the things I love about trail, because when you're on the road is very blunt as far as if it's flat, you're either on pace or you're not. Versus on a trail, it's like, this mile looks really different from last mile. I don't really know. Like, it's got more lumps to it, and so it's just, you can go off of like effort and grit. And it's, for me, I think also just because I do a lot of road racing. I live near Griffith Park in LA, so like my standard runs are very hilly, like 2,000 feet of like just climbing up and down stuff. And yeah, each mile is different. So I don't even look at my watch. Like, I don't know what is a 9-minute pace. Awesome. Is it terrible? I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, it kind of depends on the hills. Like on a road, I think like my advice I say to like road runners in the off season is like, put the watch away and go run some trails, because like you just get so fixated. Oh, was I 7:15 or 7:30 on my last split? Like, why am I getting slower? Like, it's like, it was. There's a lot to be said for just enjoying the running for its own sake.
Yeah. So many of those glucose gels that you buy, you flip it over and it has directions, and it says take one 45 minutes before activity and one every 45 minutes during activity. Let's talk about Ketone IQ, taking supplemental ketones on a workout or on a training run or in a race. How you already said that they ingest very quickly and take effect very quickly. How long do they last, and how do I need to have a gallon of this? Do I need to have a hydration bladder full of Ketone IQ, or what?
The way that I use it, the way I recommend to use it, is take it in a 3-to-1 ratio with carbs to ketones. So meaning every third gel you have a ketone IQ as well. The reason I like saying it that way is because if you're going on a run where you're not using any onboard nutrition, then don't use any ketone IQ either. If you're going on a run, you're having it every 45 minutes or every 5 miles or whatever your heuristic is for reloading, then I like to think about it in terms of a ratio, because then however much fuel you were going to use, okay, cool, great, just like have 25% coming from ketone IQ so that you're able to get the parallelized ketones and carbs, like the Prius effect. And one note too, just on the topic of these gels, is when you flip over the back of the gel, the other thing that you'll notice is these days there's several different types of carbohydrate. Like when you flip over a GU or a Morton, there's several different types of carbohydrates, and what they're doing there is they're trying to parallelize within the carbohydrate pathway. They'll give you maltodextrose and glucose and fructose. So there's like mini parallelization that goes on inside of carbohydrates, where there's like slight differences in how different carbohydrates are parallelized. And it's true, like they are, different. It's probably better to have some breadth there. And then that's where ketones is really interesting, because you can think of carbohydrates as like different lanes on the highway, and then ketones is like this other whole like turnpike. It's this other whole expressway that's in parallel. So the parallelization is already happening via like the different types of carbs, and then you can think of ketone as this other like other form. You'll also see sometimes they'll have BCAAs, which is branched chain amino acids, which is like protein, and it's a broken down form of protein that you can actually use for energy. Like it's less for, in that context, less for muscle building and more just another parallelized form of substrate that you could use for energy production. So yeah, the name of the game, if I think there's one takeaway, is parallelization.
Yeah.
And for California listeners, that ketone lane we're talking about is the diamond lane that allows you to travel unencumbered by the congested traffic, and you get to slide on over if you have enough people in the car. And that's the special lane, and that's the ketone lane. I'm riding in a Prius in the diamond lane, expressing my way through all the commute traffic. I like it.
Do you think that that California is the only state that has diamond lanes, Don?
Probably.
You lived in California way too long.
Hey, we're a global podcast here. Okay.
So go ahead, Don.
No, you continue, and I have a follow-up question. Okay, you said how often should we take it? How often would she take it? We take it. And so save your question, Scott. And we talked about running or doing some athletic event, but I'm on a Zoom call. And I've got to be sharp, and I've got important meetings coming up, and I want to be the person that comes up with the answer because it's an important meeting. What kind of frequency? How long does it last? Back to Scott's thing. Same questions instead of on the trail into the meeting.
In a meeting, I'll have it at the start of the meeting or 15 minutes before, just to kind of rewind the tape as well. Like the way that I mainly use it, the way that we position it in our community is have it first thing in the day, just period, as a energy boost. Like it's similar to a glass of water with lemon in it, or your other supplements that you may have, or a cup of coffee. It's like first thing in the morning as a energy lift. It helps to extend your overnight fast. You feel the effects more pronounced on an empty stomach, and then have it like if you go for a run right after that, great. If not, like you can have Ketone IQ once, twice throughout the day to kind of re-up. So I always think about it as like a nice energy rise to start the day, and then re-up kind of as needed. And I would say it's more effective on a relatively empty stomach. If you have a giant meal and then you eat Ketone IQ, you're just less likely to feel anything, and like you just ate a lot, so the effect's going to be diminished. A lot of people like to use it when, if you like running on an empty stomach, then but you want to feel more energy. Ketone IQ is really helpful. If you're in general, a lot of people just don't want to be eating all day. Ketone IQ has this kind of appetite control effect where when you have it, you feel less hungry. So people will try to I would say it's more of a morning energy stack that you can kind of have throughout the day through the afternoon, rather than having it after a big meal. Not that it's going to keep you up at night, it doesn't have a stimulation property to it, but in terms of when the effect is going to be more pronounced, people tend to front load it in the day.
Yeah, I think I have another question, but I think that's an important thing to take in consideration. A lot of the traditional fuels that we're used to, whether it's some kind of a carbohydrate or whether it's caffeine or other stimulants, there's a steep curve that gets you up to the top, and then there's a cliff and you drop off. And as we were getting to know a little bit more about Ketone IQ, we learned that there isn't that steep cliff that you drop off of. So you can take it right before bed and not have an issue getting to sleep is what I understand. Is that correct?
It's true. It doesn't have this steep drop off because it's not a stimulant. It's not a drug. It's not blocking any hormone receptor. Like caffeine blocks your adenosine receptor, and adenosine is your sleep hormone. So it blocks it kind of until it doesn't, and it blocks it and you feel that fall off. Sugar, spikes your insulin, which is a hormone, and when your insulin is high, then and then all your blood glucose gets metabolized. You have this high insulin that's remaining that all of a sudden makes you feel really hangry, a couple hours after you eat something really carby, or you feel sleepy. A lot of people feel logy. It's also known as the itis. There's different names for how you feel after you eat a big carby meal, and ketones don't have that. It's more akin to, it's like water. It's you don't just all of a sudden feel dehydrated. If you have a big cup of water right now, it's not 3 hours later you're all of a sudden parched and thirsty. It's a lot more of a gentle slow, but you do get thirsty again eventually. Ketone IQ is going to have you feeling good for a few hours, depending on what you're doing. But it doesn't like drop you off of this cliff. It's more of like this, you kind of burn through it, and then you're back off where you started, rather than feeling like depleted. And on the topic of sleep, yeah, it's not a stimulant. It's not blocking any sleep. Again, to draw the similarity to water, it's like water is really interesting. Where if it's 10 a.m. and you're dehydrated and you drink some water, you're going to feel more energized. If it's 10 p.m. and you're dehydrated and having a hard time falling asleep, you have a few sips of water, you're going to have a better time falling asleep. Like water is, the primitive of all primitives. Like that's a very adaptive, fundamental substrate that's used all throughout your body. And it's like, okay, so how does this magic molecule of water, of H2O, like help you to be more alert in the day, but then help you go to sleep at night? It's like, you see that more when you go towards the primitives of the system. The lower on the hierarchy, like the very specific targeted drugs, they tend to target a very specific endpoint and just like smash that endpoint with a hammer, versus what's higher up on the hierarchy, like a protein or water or a ketone. Like those are more adaptive to whatever your body is doing throughout the day. So we've seen this play out too, just like with ketones, like at night. Like one of the big studies done with cyclists was it was a 3-week long study where cyclists were training every single day. It was meant to mimic Tour de France, and they were having ketones 3 times throughout the day, and including right before bedtime. And the ketone group over that 3-week study had significantly higher recovery and 15% higher output in the final time trial at the end of that. And this was all double-blinded, placebo-controlled. So like the non-ketone group was drinking something else that was weird tasting, but just was inert. So there was no effect on sleep quality, and the group that was having more ketones was recovering more quickly.
Did you have something, Don? Oh, looked like Don's frozen.
It's frozen for me too.
We'll wait. We'll wait for him to come back. I have a question. So, are there any side effects or are there any risks in using supplemental ketones? Can you OD?
We have language on our packaging to say don't go above 3 or 3.5 servings a day. So that's the kind of like cover your ass language that we have there.
Okay.
I personally sometimes have more. I'm very comfortable with the side effect profile on it, but that is what it says on our pack, and what that is what we are able to state is like up to that amount. I expect that that's going to expand over time as this low side effect profile in general. Again, your body, the amount of ketones that you could have in ketone IQ is very small compared to what your body could be making if you were fasting or doing low carb or a lot of endurance exercise. Like one way to think about it too is a shot of ketone IQ has 10 grams of ketones. A can of Coca-Cola has 37 grams of exogenous sugar. So like pound for pound, like we should be more worried than we are about slamming that 37 grams of sugar. So that's what I comment on it, is like, I'm not worried about ketones. I think ketones are superior for a ton of reasons. They're not spiking your insulin. Like we didn't even talk about that, but that like when you're having a lot of sugar, your body is releasing insulin in order to address that sugar. And over time, you develop insulin resistance, which is known as type 2 diabetes, and which is a contributor to, besides diabetes itself being bad, it contributes to all the other top causes of mortality, cardiovascular disease. It seems like it's linked to cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, as like insulin resistance of the brain. So like you don't want to develop insulin resistance. The fact that you can have a fuel that is instantly bioavailable, that feels good, and is not running roughshod over your metabolic health, to me is super appealing. Like I still mainly eat real, like I go to like Chipotle for lunch every day. Like I'm still mainly like a normal person. It's just like, I don't know, 5-10% of my calories in a day. I'm comfortable coming from Ketone IQ because it just gives me that extra sharpness throughout what I'm doing.
Good answer.
And it's interesting you call it Ketone IQ. When you're coming up with the name, naturally you would think, well, if you were going towards performance, athletic performance, maybe, ketone PR or PB, whichever you want to call it. But you went ketone IQ for obvious reasons, because after you try it, you realize, you know what, maybe I'm the smartest guy in this room. I don't know. It seems like I see a lot of things here. That's what you feel. It may not be true, but you have a sense like, wow, things are really popping here. So ketone IQ, have there been any studies like we have one group, a control group, not taking it, and now this group taking some ketone IQ? Is there some studies out there about that? And maybe DARPA did it. Maybe they did a lot of these studies to find out, hey, are our fighter pilots better, quicker, and faster taking this stuff? Are the kids taking it, doing the video games? There's a group. So anyway, I should let you talk. You can tell maybe I took some ketone IQ. My questions may not be good, but I have a lot of them. So go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, we do a lot of control studies where we test ketone IQ against it's interesting because ketone IQ it has a very pungent taste to it. And so in order to placebo control it, you can't feed someone, water, they'll know. But so we actually have like a flavor matched placebo where we basically taken water and made it taste crazy. So it's like up there with ketones. And yeah, it's interesting too, because there's a whole like live space around ketones where, again, there's ketogenic diet, there's MCT, which is we talked about earlier. A lot of people put in their bulletproof coffee. So there's studies from 2 decades ago of showing like MCTs and ability to reverse symptoms of Alzheimer's when people elevate their ketones through a ketogenic diet supplemented with MCTs. And so it's a whole field of investigation. We are doing a ton around ketone IQ per se. And then there's just researchers at different hospitals, universities that have been interested in either like literally using our product or just like other ways into ketosis. And yeah, just like connecting the dots there on, hey, like this type of tumor tends to thrive more on glucose, and when glucose isn't present, then the tumor growth slows. Like, interesting. Like in that context, if someone needs energy, like a ketogenic diet that's supplemented with exogenous ketone could be an interesting adjunct to the other typical treatments for that tumor. So like there's a lot of independent, interested groups, like, which makes me very happy, because it'd be very weird if like I was the only one or my team was the only one like carrying the torch here. Like we have made ketones mainstream in a way that no one has. We have led this category, made it ubiquitous in this effective form that we have. Like we've done a lot there, but I also see us as standing on the shoulders of giants. Like there's a lot of researchers out there that are independently looking at metabolic health, and we're all trying to solve the same thing. And at the end of the day, like that's what's really exciting to me, is like making this big dent, and like it's validating to me to see the other research that's going on outside in the world around how ketones can help with metabolic health, whether that like involves us directly or indirectly. Like I'm just excited to see the field flourish.
Do you ever scratch your head for a moment and ask yourself, why are we the first to market with this? How come this is, since we've had some understanding of ketones, how come everybody else hasn't gone forward with this? Why was it left for me to push it forward?
I think that's a question you can always ask as an entrepreneur. It's like you're either like smart or you're an idiot. Like why? Like,
so which is it, Michael?
I mean, you tell me. Like I think it's playing out in a certain way. I mean, if I put on my entrepreneur cap, like this isn't even the first idea that I had and that we had. Like I've been doing different types of startups for some time now, and it's interesting, right? Because I mean, this gets very philosophical on entrepreneurship, where it's easy to look at any entrepreneurial idea and just say like, hey, if that was such a good idea, why doesn't it already exist? Like, and I think it is a good question. It's like, hey, why you? Why now? Like, why? And sometimes it's a good point. It's like, yeah, maybe like flying shoe. Like if that needed to exist, like wouldn't it already exist? Like I think that you can ask that question about a lot of types of innovation. Look, my answer is just that it was really expensive, and a few different dots needed to get connected in the universe in order to scale up the manufacturing, in order to like plug it in with the right participant groups in order to capitalize the whole endeavor with investor money. Like there was a few different dots that needed to get connected that weren't quite connecting, and I'm connecting them. Like that's just day by day here.
I love this story, and it had been worked on before at $20,000 to $30,000 a dose.
Right.
So it was a good idea then, a good idea now, and tomorrow. That research was at a spot where we could reduce the cost, to $495 that you talked about earlier instead of $30,000. So I'm glad we're getting the chance to meet you and talk to you and discover some of the benefits of Ketone IQ.
A lot of fun.
The thing that I am learning as I live my life is we're in the 21st century. We have cars that drive themselves. You would think that we understand everything there is to know about human biology. I work in agriculture. I work with plant nutrition. And you would think we've been farming for thousands of years, and we should have this thing figured out. But there's nuances and new discoveries that are made that are groundbreaking. And that's what I think is funny. There's still so much out there that we don't know. And I love, Michael, that you came on and helped us learn a little bit more about ketones, how they work as a fuel, and that there's this great new product called Ketone IQ that is a supplemental form of ketones that you can take. If someone is interested in trying this, can you go down to the local grocery store and buy this? You go to CNG. Where do you get Ketone IQ?
You can always buy it on our website, hvmn.com. We're on Amazon, and increasingly we're in a store in your neighborhood. We launched nationwide in Sprouts, and we're in the refrigerator at Sprouts in the supplement section. So find us. We're in the top right corner there. And in retail, the first shot is free. There's a little QR code next to the bottle and on the bottle that you can scan and get your first shot free in any store that we're in. We're in a lot of gyms. So we're in Earth Bar at Equinox. We're in a lot of running shoe stores and Fleet Feets. Fleet Feets are all like independently managed, so we're in some of them, not in others yet. We're in a lot of bike stores, gyms, and increasingly more places. Always down to talk with people who own gyms, running shoe stores, etc., and see if there's a way we can partner on some fun activations together. And yeah, the easiest way to find us is probably our website or Amazon, and then we're coming soon to a store near you, if not already.
I think we may have mentioned, but I think it's worth mentioning HVMN. Can you tell us what that is an acronym for and where you came up with that?
Yeah, that is Health Via Modern Nutrition, and I started that initially, the thesis of the company was to investigate interesting breakout ideas in modern nutrition. So that is the umbrella brand of it all. And very decidedly, ketones, what I'm really excited about, like I'm not launching a creatine powder next month or anything like that. Like all of our future product innovations around Ketone IQ technology platform, because I just think it's huge. It's like if you're Gatorade and you invented electrolytes, like don't go and launch a peanut butter or something. Like stick stick to your script. Like stick with what's working. So that's where we're at. So yeah, HVMN, Healthy Modern Nutrition, breakout venture scale ideas in human nutrition, and then we incubated Ketone IQ and are having a lot of fun making a big dent, hopefully, with that.
Oh, I think you will. I think you are, and you have with Scott and I know that, and we hope that we stay on your list to come talk to again when you continue to innovate and come up with something different. We'd love to learn about it, share it, and really are rooting for you, Michael. It's a great story to watch.
Thanks so much, Don. Scott, thanks for having me on. Congrats on the amazing platform you've built and audience. I'm thrilled to be here. Glad we could get this done.
Yeah, if you're a trail runner that loves to experiment, and I think most of us do, we love to try to see what our bodies can do and how they react to different stimuli. I'm telling you, go grab some Ketone IQ and give it a shot. No pun intended. And see how your body reacts. Don and I have been very impressed with our experiments of one. But more importantly, make sure you go out and run.
And biohack Moss.
Biohack Moss.